everyone for being here. As Marily said, Melios and myself will present you our work on the question of, I would say, machine-readable rights and how these relate to different forms of situations where you actually share content, scientific content, research contents, and how different value chains are being created. I'll start with the presentation. The idea today is to work on the question of how we what are the main issues we have with machine-readable licenses and machine-readable legal documents today, and then try to see how we can, with the work we're doing in the context of OpenAIRE, how we can go a step further. And for that reason, we have developed a kind of a game, which leads to the creation of different JSON cards. And Melios is going to also guide us through the interface. And this is something we will make available to everyone. Our prototype, we just had these built last week. So this is a totally new thing. And this is going to help a lot in terms of identifying the ways in which value is produced and ways in which you can document legally different forms of research results and share them. So the whole question of ownership is a key starting point for us. So how do we actually document different rights and different types of resources once research has completed the cycle? And then what we have done during OSFair and what we're doing now. So trying to explain the key components of our solution to the issue and how you can potentially use it in the context of open science. And of course, we have a series of challenges which we're trying to address with our work, with our research, which is the Open Rights Expression Language Framework, where we stand now, what we do, and then describing how a workshop would work. And then we go to the puzzle game, which is the methodology we use in order to identify different types of rights and value and different types of resources, and in that way to construct this value chain where the content is created. So I'll start with the issue we have today. What we see is that the content which is produced, the research which is produced both by individual researchers, but also by research institutions, is not just consumed by humans, increasingly is consumed by machines, as particularly when used for different types of LLMs. This means that we need to be able to identify who owns the outputs, the data, and the value that they generate, but also who bears the actual cost of training an LLM and who are the entities that actually reap the value. And these are questions which we always had in the context of research. And the approach has always been, let's open up as much as possible, let's close as much as is necessary. But the context has changed so dramatically over the past couple of years that it's not possible because the data points are so many, that it's almost impossible for humans to actually get the content, train the models, but make sure they resolve all kinds of legal issues in relation to resources and the legal issues in relation to the services through which the content is being made available. This means that we don't have to deal just with copyrights as we did in the past, but increasingly we have to deal with issues of data protection. GDPR is maturing the General Data Protection Regulation in terms of its implementation and its incorporation in the different processes and technologies of institutions producing research or disseminating research. But it means that we also need to make sure that we have a way in which this is expressed in a machine-readable way. In addition to that, researchers and research-performing organizations or research funding organizations are very conscious of the ethical issues in relation to research resources. So it's not the same situation as it was, let's say, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, when we would primarily go for opening the content. Increasingly, we have to answer ethical questions. What is the LLM the content is being used to train? What is the use of my data? These are the things which we need to be able to answer in order to answer and then to express in different ways, so that we have the ability to respect the wishes of the researchers and the research performing organizations. And last but not least, data are almost invariably not offered as such, but always through some kind of a repository or a service or an API, which again, it has its own rules as to what is the kind of traffic it can sustain, and someone actually has to pay for that. So it's not just the data set, for example, you're looking to license, but it's also in terms of property, but it's also the data protection questions, it's the ethical questions, and if this is offered through an API, what are the terms of service that's in a sense envelop this data. So these layers, understanding these layers is essential to building trust and interoperability in an environment where you have a lot of AI-related technologies being involved. So what have we done up to now? At OSFair, we introduced the Open Rights Expression Language, or OpenRel framework, and explore different ways in which, or different scenario under which different organizations, whether they were research funders or AI developers, we try to construct different value chains and different scenarios. And we'll talk about this later today. And each of these value chain scenario, we try to see what each stakeholder wishes to do and how they can express that in terms of rights of different sorts, as the ones we explained before, and also try to see which are the main gaps we see. So very, very quickly, rights are very fragmented across copyright, data protection, ethics, and terms of service. I mentioned that before as well. It's not just copyrights. Licenses are primarily used for copyrights, but they do not cover so much the terms of service or other concerns that researchers have, like embargoes or consent, if you talk about personal data. And finally, while we have machine readability and interoperability, this is quite limited, and it's quite limited in the sense that it refers to existing licenses, for example, Creative Commons licenses, and there we have, for example, in the CC-REL framework, expressions of a specific license elements, but we don't have the level of modularity that you need in a scenario, and we'll go through a scenario and understand what we mean by that. So we need new tools and languages in order to be able to express these different concerns of different stakeholders. And what we're doing is we're trying to develop this methodology, which is game-like, in order to extract from the users their needs, and then to see how these are expressed in different models. So we mentioned before the types of rights that we need to incorporate here. And the question is always to minimize transaction costs, open as much as possible, close as little as necessary, and make sure that rights clearance are automated. Now, let's go a bit deeper in the issues we have. The thing is that while we have a great standardization in the licensing area, or at least a significant one because of the Creative Commons licenses, we don't have the same kind of standardization in terms of conditions, TNCs, or terms of service, TOS. There, people have a lot of custom licenses. So we need to be able to somehow standardize this. And the mechanism, the heuristic we're using is by taking a lot of cases through workshops like this one from participants. We're able to then see which of these conditions keep appearing, and then try to standardize them both legally but also in the form of a rights expression framework. The second thing is that we have different types of rights which need to be expressed in different types of conditions, plus different types of rules. So sometimes the rules are legal. So for example, I hold property rights on a resource, and these property rights have to be expressed in a rights expression language. But very frequently, I would have ethical concerns. I wouldn't like, for example, my research data to be used for research which relates to the development of weapons, just making this up. Or I wouldn't like my research to be used for commercial purposes. So this is the kind of restrictions which we need to see how we express as well, and particularly in the case they go beyond the license. And finally, what we increasingly see is that the research results are being reused in an abusive way. So without, for example, reference to the researchers, or in a way which really kills the repository, or it kills the API in terms of the burden it imposes on it. We need to see how we're going to be able to do that in a clear way. We need to see how we are going to be able to express it in different ways, and we need to see how we're going to express the different new constructs like the secondary publishing rights. We mentioned these questions before. And this has to do a lot with the non-standardized terms that we find in different legal contracts. So I'm not going to go in any additional depth. But the other thing which we see is that we don't have support that's another area which seems to be emerging as an issue from our experience. So what we're trying to do is not just develop a service which is going to be useful in a box, but also to develop support for how it can be developed on an ongoing basis. And that's why OpenAIRE is quite important. So it's not just developing a rights expression language, but also a framework and a service where people which wish to develop licenses or terms of service in using these rights expression languages to have someone to speak with. Here, I think the important thing is to go back to the essentials of how we express things. In open rights, in different rights expression languages, particular care is placed an emphasis on the actual machine readable form, but we would like to make sure that this operates within a legal framework, so it's legally readable, and also it's something which people can easily understand, and they can construct standardized legal texts through a set vocabulary, but then you have an easy to read legal human framework as well. This is a tradition that comes from Creative Commons, which they had these 3 layers, but in rather big chunks of legal functionality, which are called license elements. For example, the attribution clauses in the Creative Commons licenses, or the share-alike element, or the non-commercial element. We want to create smaller types of parts of licenses or sort of legal documents that can be machine read. For example, if you want to set a condition which is a time condition in relation to when you can start using the web, like an embargo, or if you wish to set a geographical condition that to be easily expressed in JSON, and also to be easily to be read and resolved through a technical system. And of course, this is for us important to have the community involved in the whole process. So where we are right now, we've developed the first document and a rights expression language state of the art, which, by the way, we will share with you after this workshop. There we explored all the different rights markup languages, ODRL, MBEC21, REL, and CC-REL. And we see how these languages, we also explored how they're integrated in different repos and platforms like Zenodo, Europeana, Dance, or ETA, and which are the types of rights they cover. And we took these, which are mostly XML type of schemes, and we're trying to create a new layer where we express those things in on a JSON level and also cover all the areas mentioned above. So let's take a pause now and let's see what we're going to be doing in terms of this. So this is the framework, this is the problem we have, this is our approach and the tools we're using. Let's see what's going to be happening today in terms of the workshop. So the idea here is to identify different scenarios with different types of stakeholders. So we have 4 types of key stakeholders: researchers, that's in scenarios A1 and A2, research performing organizations, research funding organizations, and an LLM developer. So these are the roles that we have, and each one of them is trying to impose or tries to read the kinds of terms that the other players, the other stakeholders have imposed in relation to a particular set of research outcomes. And every time you are to express any kind of legal documents, you always have to do it in 3 layers, in 3 dimensions, actually. What are the obligations that you want to be attached in relation to a data set? What are the permissions you want to have in relation to this data set? And what are the restrictions you want to have? So you have 3 types of terms that you impose. And we thought of 3 licensing or value models. One model, one scenario where the different stakeholders, they really wish to go over something which is as open as possible, what we call pure open. And then a second scenario when we have a mixed open and closed scenario, and the third one, which is more commercial, and we call a funder custom license. And the question is, in each case, what is the kind of value which is produced, and how, as the research outcomes travel from one part of the value chain to the other, how does the value return back to the different stakeholders? So the idea here is that we should think of these scenarios in the context of producing value. And we work with scenarios and we work with different roles because we want to see any kind of legal document in the context of a particular and specific way in which you may produce value. If you have this way of producing value, then you can start working on how you can express your wishes as a stakeholder in terms of obligations, permissions, and restrictions, and to what extent you either divulging further research results or obtaining research results, which are the kinds of obligations, permissions, and restrictions you should be looking for in order to achieve your value goals that you have. And we'll understand this better once we go to the specific example. So every time we want this to be expressed in different forms of metadata and describe different rules of use. So who can use materials, if there are any temporal conditions, and under which conditions the use could be done. So whether it's something which is more copyright related, and in that sense is going to be found in a license, whether this is something which is data protection related and it's going to be in data protection statements, and how you can make these rights clear and machine readable. Now, the other important thing is this kind of transition from XML to JSON. So we want to move from something that has been expressed traditionally in XML. We want to express in JSON, which is lighter, web-friendly, and easier to read. And it's also something used by APIs, repositories, and AI tools. And for this exercise, what we do is a simplified version of JSON without brackets and parentheses so that it looks as close to natural language as possible. So what we do is we think of a scenario, you think of different roles, then we try to express the different types of value and see how this transition is going to take place. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to use the Open Rights Expression Language Puzzle app. So we're going to guide you through the operation of the application and then see how this is going to be expressed and how values being flowing, how values is actually flowing in each of these scenarios. It's pretty much what we've done now. We talked about the context, the key things we've done up to now. Then we're going to move to the live demonstration, and then we're going to reflect and discuss what we've seen to then see the next steps, which is to continue developing our model. So at this stage, I think I'll pass the floor to Melios in order to go to the actual application, and then we'll return back to the presentation to reflect a bit on how it's being used. But before I pass to Melios, I'm wondering if there are any questions or whether you would like us first to go through the game app, and then after that to discuss these ideas. I don't know if you have any questions before we're actually going to go through the application. I take that as a no. So Melio, back to you. Let's go through the let's start with the platform and start discussing how it works and what.
Okay, thank you, Pro. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for your participation. Just a few words at OSFair. We ran this hands-on workshop with physical puzzle cards. Today is actually the first time we present the digital version, so you will get a first look at how it works. When it's finalized, of course, it will be published online for everyone to explore and play. So I'm going
And
to share
Melio, we're going to send to all participants a link
Yes, of course.
afterwards, so
It
that
will be open.
you can work with it, and we would love to see how this is going to be used. But we would like to show you what Melios just said, how we can move from a physical interface, which by the way is great fun, to a digital one, and try to explain how this works. Back to you, Melio.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? I hope so. So let me now show you how you will translate these ideas into something interactive. This game that I'm presenting right now, it's a digital continuation of our OSFair workshop designed to help people understand and negotiate rights, ethics, and data conditions. It's a learning tool, a way to visualize how rights translate into real-world decisions and responsibilities. So now it's the first screen. You can choose your team from here. You can see also the directions here. We have, you can choose your scenario and choose 3 categories of rights holders or data users who choose 2 kinds of scenarios. Let's go through with the first.
So I will jump in every time. So the
Of course,
idea
of course.
here, yeah. So if you
You are the pro here.
no, but if you can unselect rights holders so
Yes,
that
of
we see the
course.
whole thing. So what you see here is that you have two options. One is to actually focus more on a group of rights holders of different sorts, and the other way is to actually be on the recipient end. So we have two types of broad teams you can work with. Of course, you can work consecutively with both, but the whole idea is to, at every time, a different range of scenarios appears to you. And then once you go, for example, if you want to see the things from a supply perspective, so you as a right holder, then you can see which are the scenarios that are made available to you. And then once you choose one of them, then you move on further. But of course, you will see there are some overlaps, because in a particular scenario, you may have you may be representing different sides, but there are different things you wish to do. So Melio, back to you.
Yes, so we have also the data users scenarios. We'll move forward to choose one scenario to see the next screen. And now the game will begin. So here we have the scenario details. Imagine you are a social science researcher documenting oral histories from war zones. You want to publish your findings openly while protecting sensitive testimonies and respecting a 12-month embargo period. This is the first scenario. You can see here the key learning objectives to understand exactly what is the scenario. And so, Pro, we're going to
Melios,
start.
before you go to the card bank. So here, this is something which we try to explicate, but that's a classic research process. So you are a researcher and you want to achieve something here. So you want to do your research, but at the same time, you have some goals which are ethical, but they're also part of your, research conducts. So in this scenario here, we wrote the scenario in plain language, and we're trying to see how you're going to be able to extract from this scenario the different types of conditions, irrespectively of the kind of legal document in which they appear. So when you are a researcher doing social science, in the example here, you don't care necessarily whether what your conditions are like. I mean, you don't care whether this is copyright or this is data protection or this is ethics. What you care is to achieve this thing for you. So if we go, Melo, if you hover over the question mark, so we see the learning objectives again in the scenario details. Here you have three types of things which you want to achieve. So you want your material to be as open as possible because you want your research to be known, but you have an embargo requirement because you want this to happen after you do, I don't know, you have a publication in the pipeline, and for whatever reason, you want to wait for 12 months. The second thing is that you want to make sure that whoever uses the data which you make available, they want to be GDPR compliant. And this is something you're doing not just for legal obligations, which you have legal obligations against your participants in the research and your research ethics board in your organization, but this is something you believe as a researcher. And finally, you wouldn't mind people using it for machine learning purposes. And this is something which you need to see how you're going to do it. So you know already, this is the step one. As a stakeholder, you need to be able to really explicate what are your key objectives in relation to a particular scenario of research outcomes. And that by itself is a very important process because it makes you think of things that you wouldn't normally think as a researcher. And to do that, what we have done in the card bank is you have different, it says copyright, but it's not just copyright cards. It is all the types of rights. And whichever legal document you have, no matter what, it's always expressing three things: things you must do, things you can do, and things you cannot do. No matter which legal document you read, it's going to have these three elements. So what we've done is, instead of leaving the whole thing on the researcher, let's say that you assume this scenario, to choose from a sea of different statements, we have tried to compartmentalize them into small statements. And we have hundreds of those. So here, in each case, and I don't know, Meli, if you want to say more things about how you structured it, there is a particular philosophy as to how we choose every time 6 or 5 cards. Do you want to say more about that, Meli, or shall I do it?
You can do it. Just explain we have the 3 main domains, and we have to play with this puzzle, and we can just drag and drop whatever we think that it's matched with those 3 domains.
And if you go, for example, GDPR here, Meli,
Yes.
then you see the GDPR cards. And if you go ethics, then you see the ethics cards. And the reason why we do that is we want to assist this role, assist the researcher in identifying the kinds of things they need. So instead of giving them chunk, just get these 6 Creative Commons license, which don't really make sense. Why should you CC BY SA and not CC BY and CND? We give statements which are easier to understand. They are closer to natural language. And that relates to this point we mentioned before, that you need to have 3 layers: human readable, machine readable, and legal readable. So this thing, in the end, it should be producing the relevant documents. And also we try to highlight that there are 3 things you could be contemplating on. You could be contemplating on proprietary, on issues of property, of intellectual property, of copyrights, or on issues of GDPR or on issues of ethics. So if we go back to the copyright section, I would ask you, which of the cards do you think they are relevant for the scenario we have here? I don't know if you have any idea or if you want to. Anyone interested in actually giving it a go?
Let's go together, Pro, and you can explain during the session.
Okay, you want to go to make the choice now, or should Melios?
I don't know. I'm thinking I'll choose this for must do.
So the thing is that this one is the and once you choose a card, this card goes in the must do, and then you see if there are 5 more left, and see if there is any of them corresponding to the scenario details. So respect 12 months embargo, apply the open license after expiry. This is pretty much the thing that you see in the last sentence of the scenario details. Attribution required. Should we have this? If we go to the scenario details, you don't see it there as a condition. So it's not necessarily something you must do, but it could be, and that's the thing which we want to explore here, that's something you haven't thought of, but it doesn't seem to contravene any of the details or of the things that the scenario describes. So let's try to move it in the must-do obligations as well. Attribution required, Melios.
Can do. Right?
Or can do, or the attribution required in the must-do. In copyright, the very first card.
Okay, here.
Yeah.
If we're gonna change.
Yeah. And then let's see which are, do we have anything else? File European patent before publication, licenses via ETS. We don't have that. Required funded research to be open within 12 months under license. We don't see that either. Or the institutional repository. Respect license terms, probably it is there, so let's move that as well. Respect license terms. Okay, and then we move to the can do. Allow machine learning used during embargo? Probably not. TDM for research permitted? I'm not sure. Let's put it in and see what's going to happen.
Okay.
Allow both commercial and non-commercial reuse after openness. We don't know. It seems probably yes. Let's put it in as well.
Yes, but just keep in mind that we have include the most important points rights at the beginning. We're working with our scenarios.
Yeah. I'm just adding stuff also. Sometimes
I know,
I may be wrong.
Understand.
I may be wrong in what I'm doing, right?
You make an interaction with a puzzle.
And use data sets that allow commercial use and derivatives, which is the last can do. And then let's go to the cannot do. Must be notified of application and commercial exploitation, for example. Let's move it here. And no commercial or use or derivative works without a fee. This is apparently wrong, but I'm putting it here to see how this is going to work. All right, let's move to GDPR. I would go for anonymized oral history. I would go for share anonymized or consented data. So in the can do section. And I would go cannot allow unsafe or unlawful disclosure of personal data. I go with 3 and block access to non-compliant users. Just making like the choice here. And then going to ethics, apply EU AI ethics guidelines. and build models, provide fair access. And then I would go no funding for projects breaching EU ethical codes. I'm just putting things almost randomly here. So we have constructed with this one, if you see for each section, whether it's copyright, GDPR, or ethics, we've essentially constructed the key components of our legal document. And if we do that very diligently, we understand the kinds of things we certainly want, or we could see in the scenario that there are things which are less than clear, and there we have to make a choice. But in reality, and the idea of this whole exercise is to have the amount of statements necessary for someone, as Melios said before, to identify the key components of each document. So in terms of copyright, which are the key things that you want to say in terms of GDPR? Which are the key things you want to prevent or to do? And similarly in terms of ethics. Let's go to the next part.
So here we can see our results, see what we have already chosen, and compare with the answer key.
So here, what we've done, because this is the educational tool, is not the actual tool that would use to construct the licenses. Depending on the scenario, we allow people to actually check whether what they have opted for is compliant with the scenario or not. So if we go, I don't know, for example, if you see in the case of the can do, you see the things which are missing, the things that shouldn't be there, and the things which are fine. So no commercial use in the cannot do was correct in copyrights, or we said respect 12 months embargo. You didn't need to have the CC BY as an extra thing, or respect license terms as an extra thing. And in certain cases, things that shouldn't be there. Like they must be notified of publication and commercial exploitation. Similarly, if you scroll down, Melio, you will see the same thing happening on GDPR and the same thing happening on ethics as well. So trying to see how different parts of what we do are expressed in different scenarios, and to what extent we actually have managed to express our scenario correctly with our cards or not. Melio, back to you about the JSON parts.
Yes. Here, if we have the correct answers, we can copy the JSON snippet and use it as real metadata.
So what happens is, if we have, once you have the correct answers, and so this is also something for us to explore how we're going to implement in the tool at a subsequent stage, you could be able, once you have expressed what you wish to do, this to operate essentially like a wizard to build your JSON expression. So let's say that this was not this is more for instructional purposes, but if once we complete this phase, we will be able to get the scenario expressed and then the card bank used in order to move from a natural language scenario to a modular scenario where you have different cards expressing your value ideas and your value objectives. And once you have that, it should be able to translate it into JSON and to legal code. So we will be starting with human readable descriptions, unstructured, which is the scenario details. Then we would move to structured human readable stage, which is the card bank, essentially. And then from that to machine readable and legal readable documents, which is the next development of our tool. And this is pretty much how it would work, so that you actually move down the path and are able to express in different ways what you wish to say in different scenarios. Here, the tool in this current stage, it allows us to explore to what extent what we're describing in the scenario can be expressed in a modular way in the card banks, and then to test whether we've done this kind of transition seamlessly. Because if this has been correct, then we should be able to develop to create outputs in JSON and legally readable forms in a much easier way, because this is something which actually is much more structured. It's easy for us to develop. So what we see here is that the difficult part is, first of all, for each stakeholder to express the value that they want to achieve and to express their objectives in relation to what they wish to do, and then to translate these objectives and value proposals to different kinds of obligations, permissions, and conditions in 3 areas: in copyright, in GDPR, and in personal data and ethics. If we manage to do that, we have the tool to then express it in specific legal documents and machine-readable documents through JSON. I don't know, Melios, if you wish to add something to that or to check for another scenario.
Yes, we're going to move forward to the next section. From my point of view, it's the most important. Here we can describe or reflect, and we can discuss for all the scenarios. We have in the copyright section, the GDPR section again, the ethics section, you can write our thoughts, but now we'll skip it and go to the debrief section.
Melios, let's go back to the previous one. If you
Sorry.
can. I didn't manage to.
Okay, let's go again to put some answers from the data from the. Sorry, Pro. I will explain to you immediately. Let's go through and
Let's take
play
example
another
user.
one from a LLM developer, for example.
Okay, so you have an LLM developer, and we try to understand what they want to do. They're developing an LLM and need quality training data. So we know that this is the first big requirement they have. They need to have access to quality training data. They need to find data sets that permit commercial use while respecting GDPR and EU ethics guidelines. So again, here, we know that what this help here facilitates a bit of understanding the scenario better, how you identify data sets which allow commercial and derivative rights, ensuring GDPR compliance, and make sure that the EU AI ethics guidelines have been respected. So let's go to the card bank now, start with copyright, 12-month embargo. They don't like that. They don't care about attribution. They don't care about the patents. I think the only thing, I don't know, respect license terms. In terms of the things they want to do, the TDM for research should be permitted. So let's go this can do. And in terms of cannot do, I don't know, try the must be not, cannot exploit data set with restricted licenses. And let's go to GDPR, personal data. I think the third one, ensure projected funds comply with GDPR.
I will play with cards and you can explain the whole scenario.
So here we know that they want the data to be GDPR compliant because this is what we get here. And we also know they want to use data sets which are either anonymized or clear in terms of what they can do. And they don't want to have any sensitive data. Otherwise, this thing is going to actually block their exploitation model. And let's go to ethics. We know they want to apply EU ethics. They want to build models which are compliant, and they want to avoid harmful bias or unethical applications. So here, for each one of them, and we did it very quickly with Melios, we have different types of permissions. But if we see this matrix of copyright, GDPR, and ethics along these 3 lines, this is basically their legal implementation of their value strategy. So the scenario details is your value strategy. What do you want to do? And then this has to be somehow expressed. So by doing this thing, you're able to see to what extent what you really want to do what kind of legal documents it requires. So let's move to the next step. Okay, this is one is you compare it with the answer key.
If you want, yes.
So it could be that you don't necessarily need that. So you have additional elements that are missing or things that you shouldn't have there. Let's move to the next step. Now, this is an important thing because it allows you to go back to your value model. So the questions we have here are the questions you should be asking in the scenario details. And this value is something which we may need to add, allowing people to refine the model. So for example, the questions in relation to copyright, we have two questions here, which are very important for your reflection. So what are the obligations that you think as most critical for this scenario as a recipient? So you're a recipient, if the key point for you as an LLM provider is that you shouldn't be obliged to only use it for non-commercial purposes. So that's your key thing here. And what is your the kind of balancing between open access and commercial restriction? Here, you want it to be as open as possible. You don't want any restrictions because that adds transaction costs. If you go to GDPR, your main thing here is that you don't want, again, issues with personal data, which means either you have to be using fully anonymized data sets, or you have someone to have ensured that they're GDPR compliant, even in secondary uses. So this is the thing which normally should allow you to refine your scenario by reading these questions. And similarly, going to the ethics, you kind to try to understand which are the issues that you have in relation to ethical concerns. And here, the LLM training the organization that trains their LLM, essentially, they don't care much about ethical constraints. Other than that, they shouldn't have it as a problem. So as a recipient, they make reference to the EU ethics framework as has been defined by the high-level expert group, and that's pretty much it. They don't care about more than that. So what do we know about this actor in the value chain? They can accept data from different data providers, for example, research performing organizations that adhere to these conditions here, which are quite broad. But if a data provider, let's say a research performing organization, would have a condition, for example, they wouldn't allow commercial uses of the data sets, this wouldn't probably work for this player here. So it would mean that these two would not necessarily be able to have a seamless flow of data from the one to the other. And that's what this section allows us to do. It allows us to go back to the value model and see, have we expressed it right, or is it something we should try to express in a different way? Melios?
Yes, we can go now to the debrief room. Load from storage. We can upload a JSON if we want. And now we can see the rights holder perspective and the data user's perspective. We can see both answers. And also here we can see key difference in discussion points.
So let's try to decipher this screen as well. Go up, Melios. So here, let's assume that in our game, one of you has chosen to be the rights holder, and they had the scenario. And in the scenario they chose certain snippets for the must do's and things for the can do's and the cannot do's. And all these things, as we said before, they construct for each of the three categories the legal universe within which you wish your rights to be respected. So as an open researcher, that's one of the personas we have, one of the roles we have. You want the work to be respected. You want an embargo period 12 months, after which You don't mind which license is going to apply. And these are the things that you want people to be able to do. And these are the things that people shouldn't be able to be doing. No commercial use of derivative works with a fee. On the other hand, for example, the no commercial use of derivative works without a fee is one of your conditions for people to be using your work. If we go to the data users perspective, is that they want to have data points and they want to have data sets without restrictive licenses. That's one of the things they don't want to be there. So if we scroll down, we're going to see there are different things that work and some things that don't work. So, for example, you will see that they agree in one item, but they have issues in terms of what you could be doing in relation to the 12 months embargo. So the 12 months embargo is a core requirement for the researcher, but the LLM provider, they want something which they can use now. So here you see there is a tension between the wishes of the two entities. So or if you go further down, you will see that the copyright holder, as a rights holder, they would like to differentiate between commercial and non-commercial users. And you see that the LLM developer, they want to have things which they can use commercially as well. So essentially for each one of them, you will find tension points. So what happens when you have a tension point? One way is to say, I cannot get data from this source because we have different expectations. We want different things. The other thing you could be doing is to actually have these data being these kinds of condition lifted by an agreement, a negotiation between the two members. And in what we do in our scenario is that we are, because we allow the two stakeholders, two kinds of stakeholders, to exchange, to express their wishes along the three lines: personal data, copyright, and ethics. Once these are expressed, then they're able to actually see if there are any discrepancies. So in a sense, it facilitates the negotiation. And if you have pain points, it allows this negotiation to be almost automated if we have a way to go back to them and say, look, we have this interest by X entity. Are you willing to lift this condition? So this is a kind of a framework we're envisaging as to how in a data space, for example, you can resolve conflicts, or by allowing people to participate in a European data space to make sure that before you participate, you know which are the basic rules. So if you want to be part of that, you need to make sure that you adhere to these terms and conditions. And then once you do that, this is automated and you don't have any license conflict or condition conflict anymore. Melios?
Yes, if you want, we can go through to all the scenarios and see and discuss with our participants.
I think we should stop here for a second and just ask their audience if they have any questions in terms of what we're presenting as the methodology. I think what is important at this stage, because is to actually explain how the tool works and then share it with the participants to actually get actual input from them in relation to how they could use a particular scenario. But I don't know if we have any questions in relation to what we're trying to do and how the tool works, so that we can then see how we can see another example and try on the basis of that example to actually see how whether it's understandable how it works and how it can facilitate different perceptions as to how rights can be expressed for different types of material. Do we have any questions or comments in relation to what we just presented? Right. Perhaps what we could do is if we could run another scenario, Melio, to see how this would work, and then go through the different stages. So I'll pass the floor again to you to guide
Okay,
us through any scenario, and I'll jump in from time to time.
of course. So I'm going to reset all and start from the beginning. Okay, now we're going to select rights holder again. Let's go to research funder. Okay, scenario B. Okay, you can see also here the scenario details. You are a research funding organization setting open access policies. You want to enable innovation while ensuring ethical compliance and being notified of commercial use. You are going to see the key learning objectives here. Define open access metadates with commercial flexibility, ensure GDPR and ethical compliance in funding projects, balance transparency with commercial notification rights. I'm going to choose randomly right now. Well, I'm going to GDPR section. Must do, can do, and cannot do restrictions. Go to ethics section. I'm going to show results because here is the most important thing. We're going again to choose the data users. Let's go with this.
Inge is asking the following question. Can you only use the tool with a pre-programmed scenario or also starting from scratch? In the second case, there is no answer check. There is always an answer. If we have the tool as it works right now, and we would be more than happy to hear your feedback after we share the link. The tool right now works with a pre-existing scenario. So because we know the scenarios, it's a training tool, or it's it's experimental. We have a scenario and we have the cards you see is a kind of a small universe of options. So for example, here, when you have you're a commercial researcher, so your research lab in a big pharma, and you are preparing a long COVID data set. Now, in this case here, we have the scenario, so it's a closed scenario. And the cards pretty much allow you to discuss about different things that you want to do. For example, here we know that you want to apply for a European patent. There is always, in this scenario, and maybe you can drag and drop different cards. We essentially construct now a legal document. Essentially, that's what we do. We identify the core permissions, obligations, and conditions in order for the data to be released in terms of copyright, GDPR, and ethics. Now, at the end, there's going to be, if you compare with the answer key, you will be able to actually see the different kinds of how far away you are from the value expressed in your scenario. So there is always a correct answer in this case, because that's an educational tool. We want to see the interaction and get some comments from you. And in the next iteration, after we have the vocabulary, then it becomes open-ended. So there's no correct answer at the end. You put the things that you consider as important, and then it's going to check the conflicts between different parts of the value chain. So from the rights holder perspective and the data user perspective. But right now, it checks them in relation to a preset scenario. So here is not the actual tool as we want it to be in 12 months' time. It's the educational part of it. So we're just testing it.
It's a learning tool.
It's a learning tool.
Yes.
But after we are done with the vocabulary, because you will be able to express pretty much any license. That's our ambition.
That's our goal.
In JSON format. you should be in principle at least to do pretty much everything. If you cannot do something, we'll see how we develop a kind of a help center so that you send us your case and we'll help you to actually, we're going to enrich the vocabulary so you are able to express it as well. And as the time passes, ideally there shouldn't be, or there should be very few cases where you cannot express something through the tool. And I think for 80 to 90% of the cases, we'll get there in about 12 months because it's finite. It's not that many things you wish to do in terms of core terms. Melios, would you like to say a few things about, if you scroll up to explain what happens when it has this extra must do, it says respect 12 months embargo, apply open license after expiry, extra, and missing. What does it mean?
Missing is that it was the first thing that you have to decide to put to drag and drop in the card section.
So you haven't dragged and dropped a condition that you should have done. So
yes.
If you get missed, it means there was a card you should have used and you haven't used it. And what's an extra?
Extra is if you can put another another license in your card, you can use it.
So it means that you can have an additional. It was there, though it shouldn't be there, or
not additional, extra.
It's extra.
Yes.
Okay. And in all cases, we have always two. We always see the negotiation between two parts of the value chain. So the value chain may start from the researcher, then the research performing organization, then it could be the publisher, and then finally it could be the large language model provider. So in reality, you will have the whole thing going as a chain. But what we do here, we examine them every time as a couple. Reason being that in each case, what we want to see is how the two parts of the chain link to each other. Once you're done with the research founder and the commercial researcher, for example, then you can move to the next stage, which is the commercial researcher and the LLM provider. So the way it has been structured is that you always end up with a couple, and then at the end, you're going to have the entire chain. So it goes from the researcher to the final recipient of the data. In our case, it's always an LLM provider because that's the scenario, the value chain scenario we're using.
Yes, today is the first time that we present this tool, this application, but next time it will be very helpful to have breakout rooms and all participants can interact with this application.
So what we will do now is we'll share with a link. I don't know, Melios, if you want to do it now, or we're going to send an email. It's better if we send an email with instructions as to how you can access the tool. And we will do a follow-up workshop when we actually break out in different rooms and see how the value chain operates in practice. And we'll invite you all to take part, but it would be great if you could actually experiment with that in between, as we will keep releasing it, and we would be more than happy to work with you on that particular tool to get feedback from your sides in terms of things we should add, things that don't work for you, or things which are not evident, so that we are able to develop it further. And even at this stage, if there are additional questions in relation to how the tool works, we are more than happy to discuss them.
Also, I want to mention that is a role-playing and discussion activity.
Yeah, so we will include this information in the follow-up email. Sorry, we're seeing your screen again, Melios.
Yes, okay. I just want to read the questions.
We will include this information in relation to the tool and how you can access it on the follow-up email. And we're also going to suggest a second webinar where we can explore the tool deeper. So today the idea was to introduce you to the issues we have and the basics of the tool. And we hope we're going to have the chance to explore this further and work with you in improving it.